Okay. Well, good morning to all of you. Now, in today's class, we are going to start with a very new part of your syllabus, a very important, a very different part of your syllabus. So, that will be GS paper 4, Ethics and Integrity. So, this is what we are going to start with. A significant part of your course, 1/4 of your syllabus of mains exam, GS paper. Now, before we start with the GS paper 4, Ethics and Integrity, I will like to give you a small introduction of what exactly the syllabus of this paper is. How is it that we have organized the syllabus? How is it that we are going to proceed with our course here? So, to have an overall idea of the syllabus is an important thing with which we can start our course with. So, if you look at the syllabus of UPSC mains exam in GS paper 4, Ethics and Integrity, that there are 5-6 chapters are there, but I am not going to follow the chapter wise format in my class, chapter wise or topic wise. The way we are going to approach the course here is that I have tried to divide the whole syllabus into logically different segments. So, if you take all the syllabus, every chapter of your syllabus, every topic of your syllabus in one can say combined complete whole and divide that into logical segment, then you will see that there are 3 important part of your syllabus can be. So, we can understand the UPSC syllabus in 3 important parts. So, every chapter will come somewhere under every topic that we have to cover in our syllabus will come somewhere into one of these 3 parts. And these 3 parts of your syllabus, as we will see, have been derived from 3 different subjects. So, what UPSC has done that they have taken ideas from various subjects, discipline of study, etc., and combined them to create a beautiful syllabus for us. So, we'll talk about, we'll see that how beautiful this syllabus, how eclectic this syllabus is, how various ideas about ethics is amalgamated together in this beautiful syllabus that we have to cover in the next many days or weeks. So, let us talk about what are these 3 parts of your syllabus. First part of your syllabus comes from the field of philosophy. Philosophy is a very important branch of knowledge. We often say that philosophy is the beginning of human knowledge. That since this is the first branch of human knowledge, when human being started thinking about knowledge, etc., then philosophy was born. So, it's the oldest branch of knowledge, most extensive, most important residual branch of knowledge. Something that is not studied anywhere becomes philosophy. So, it is an important branch of knowledge. So, a significant part of your syllabus will be from the philosophy subject. In philosophy also, we are not going to discuss the whole of philosophy. In philosophy itself, we will discuss one important branch of philosophy. So, and that branch is known as ethics. So, philosophy has many other branches also, like for example, epistemology, metaphysics, logic or aesthetics. Many other branches are there. We are not going to discuss epistemology or metaphysics. Maybe in one class later, I will discuss a little of epistemology. We will see that how it is important for us. So, we may discuss a little of epistemology in one class later, but overall we are not going to discuss the deep epistemology or metaphysics or logic or aesthetics, etc. We are going to study only ethics, a very important branch or perhaps the most important branch or practical branch of ethics in a way. So, this is what, and we will discuss a little of politics. Politics is another important branch of philosophy. So, a little of politics also we will discuss in our class. Now, when I say I will discuss politics here, then I do not mean the politics of Congress and BJP, for example, what happened in Maharashtra or Karnataka maybe. No, that is not the politics. Politics here simply means the philosophical basis of governance. So, there is a whole topic in your syllabus, philosophical basis of governance. We call that as politics in this section. So, ultimately all of you are going to become a civil servant, all of you are going to become an administrator, prospective. So, it is very important for you people to know that not only how administration is done, but what are the philosophical basis on which the administrative structure of the country has been created, what are the philosophical background of our constitution, what are the principles on which our constitution is made, under which you as a civil servant will have to act. So, in philosophy part, these are the things. In politics here, we will be talking about that. So, as we will see shortly, we are going to start our course with philosophy itself, ethics itself. Ethics is basically our idea of right and wrong. So, whenever you think about right and wrong, then you are essentially doing ethics. So, in ethics part, basically we will be talking about right and wrong in our personal life, and in politics we will try to apply the same idea of right and wrong in our political life, in our governance system. Because in our personal life also you have to think about what is right and wrong, and in the governance also you have to think about what is good governance, what is bad governance, what is a good administrative action, which is not that good. So, understanding of the right and wrong at the individual level, at the personal level, at the human level is ethics, and understanding and application of that understanding of right and wrong into the political system is what we call the politics. So, we will discuss a little of politics. Every idea of right and wrong that we will discuss in ethics, we will try to apply that in the political system also. That is the final goal. We will start with ethics in personal life and we will end with politics in the social life, in the country's national life, in a public life in a way. So, that is what. So, ethics is more about private life and politics is more about the public life. That is what we will try to talk about here. That will be one major part of your syllabus. Next many days we will talk about that only. Then after second part of your syllabus will come from the field of psychology. Psychology, you may be aware, is a very new branch of knowledge. It is just for last 150 years that psychology has been existing as a new science. Before that, psychology was just a part of philosophy. Just as metaphysics, ethics, politics or logic etc. are a part of philosophy, psychology was also a part of philosophy in a way. So, all the earlier philosophers like Aristotle, or you can say John Stuart Mill or David Hume, Immanuel Kant, they were all psychologists also. But in the last 150 years, psychology has been separated from philosophy and it has been existing, studied or looked at as a new science of human knowledge, human behavior in a way. So, that is what psychology is. Psychology is basically a scientific understanding of human action, human behavior or human life. So, whatever we do in philosophy in a more rational manner, in a more speculative philosophy, maybe a thinking type of thing, in psychology we will try to do the same thing with more by applying the more scientific approach. So, it is scientific study of human life and philosophy was a speculative study of human life. So, in psychology we will be talking more like a scientist, we will be acting more like a scientist who have a lot of research, experiment etc. we will be talking about. So, this will be more like science including the biological science, neuroscience etc. We will be talking about how the body that we had, biology that we have, the structure of nervous system, our brain, limbic system or the neocortex etc. and the hormones like adrenaline or the cortisol etc. neurotransmitters like dopamine or serotonin, endorphin, oxytocin etc. How do they influence our life? How do they influence our behavior, action, success, failure etc. So, in the field of psychology, these are the things that we will be talking about. They are very important for us to know because for the last 60 years in psychology, starting from 1960s or so, a lot of research has been done in the field of psychology that has given us some very important insight, some very important knowledge about the human life, happiness or sadness or suffering, success, failure. So, all these things have been studied much more scientifically and methodically in the last 60 years. So, in this branch of our class course, we will be talking about those recent development, recent work that has been done by the scientists to understand the human life, human nature. That is what we will be discussing in the psychology part. In psychology also, as we will see later on, psychology we will do after some time, maybe a week or 10 days later. In psychology, we will be talking about 4 important chapters. First chapter of psychology will be emotional intelligence. Second important chapter of psychology will be aptitude. Third important chapter will be attitude. And the last one will be social influence. So in psychology, these are the 4 important chapters that we will be covering in our later classes. So that is what psychological aspect of ethics and integrity is. If you compare the philosophical aspect of ethics and the psychological aspect of ethics, then you will see that both of these two aspects are very closely related to each other. Very closely related, so close that we often consider both of them at the two sides of the same coin. Same thing studied in a different manner. Looking at from this side will become philosophy, and looking at the same thing from that side will become psychology. The way I like to understand both of them and their interrelationship is that philosophy, or ethics rather, ethics is more about decision making. Ethics is more about decision making. So, because whenever you make decisions in your life, then we always do ethics. Because what is a decision? Decision is that process in which we have more than one choice in front of us and we have to make decision in favor of one. So, if you have to make a decision in favor of one of the choices, then you have to think about ethics. Because whenever you make a decision, we think about right and wrong. What is right and what is wrong. So, right must be done, wrong should never be done. Right must be ensured and wrong must be prevented. That is what we call the decision. So, in decision making, whenever you make a decision, then we are essentially doing ethics there. And as far as decisions are concerned, then decision is a very important part of human life. A normal human, every day we make large number of decisions. According to one estimate, think of it. According to one estimate, a normal human being like us, a normal human being, every single day we make as many as 35,000 decisions. Every single day we make as many as 35,000 decisions. Now, it may appear a little exaggeration to you, but just think about your life. Just look at the last half an hour before you started your class here, that how many decisions you have made. Now, you might have made a decision first of all to attend the class online or not. You might have made a decision that whether you want to watch this lecture on a mobile or on a laptop maybe. You might have made a decision that yes, while sitting in front of your laptop maybe or a mobile maybe, well, which clothes you have to wear, which chair you have to sit on, what do you eat in your breakfast before that. I was asked to increase the volume. Just to wait a minute. So, let me start. So, the idea is that in just last half an hour you must have thought that before attending the classroom, for example, what you eat in your breakfast, for example. So many such. Just in half an hour you might have made maybe 50 decisions or maybe 100 also. Or right now also some of you made a decision to message me about the sound also. That would be a decision. Some of you may not may not do that. So some of you may write what I'm talking about, some of you may not write. That would still be a decision. So every single moment we make some decisions or the others in our life. So so most of these 35,000 decisions, that if you look at it, they are normal day-to-day decisions, which are very insignificant in a way. Which clothes to wear, for example, sit on this chair or that chair, or well, eat this food or that food in your breakfast. So all of these are simple day-to-day decisions that we do not give much importance to. But there are some decisions in our life which are very profound decisions, very significant, very important decisions, like for example, academic decision, that which subject do you study, which stream do you choose, science or humanity or commerce, or which college to take admission in, which tuition to attend, which classroom to come. So which coaching to attend. So these are the academic decisions which has an important implication for your life. Some decisions like professional decision, that which career to choose, how to enter into that career, or once you enter into a career, become a civil servant for example, then how to handle the case that is given to you. So those will be the professional decisions. They are very important part of our life. Some decisions will be more relationship related decision, that whom to make friendship with, whom to marry, which relationship to give more importance, more priority. Some people give more priority to their work relationship, colleagues. Some people give higher priority to their family members. So some people give high priority to their friendship, some people give low priority to that. So which relationship you are willing to, you can say willing to prioritize, that will be relationship. So these are the important decisions: academic decisions, professional decisions, and the relationship related decisions. They are very profound decisions in our life which have some significant impact on the way we lead our life. Now the idea is that we make large number of decisions, some very important and some insignificant small decision, but the fact still is that, well, we make a large number of decisions. That is why you can say many philosophers as you will see in our later classes a number of times, that philosophers often try to define a human being. What does it mean to be a human? And when they define a human being, then one of the very common definitions that is given to us is that many philosophers say that human beings are decision making animals. No other animal makes decision the way we make. We will talk a lot about that in our philosophy class in the next few days, that how do we make decisions. So there are different principles on which we make decisions. We think about right and wrong. So that is something that we are going to explore today, tomorrow, day after tomorrow, and the day after that. So that is about philosophy. Philosophy is more about decision making. On the other hand, if you look at psychology, psychology is not much about decision making. More than decision making, psychology is about, I like to call it, problem solving. Psychology is more about problem solving. So the idea here is that once you make a decision, then you know that decision becomes a problem, and you have to learn how to solve that problem. So for example, the moment you made a decision that you will become civil service as a career choice, then, well, it has become a problem how to become a civil servant. And you are trying to solve that problem right now by attending the classroom, for example. So the moment you make a decision, it has become a problem which you have to solve. Psychology helps us in the problem solving. So in a way you can say ethics helps us to take good decision, and psychology helps us to implement that decision in an effective manner. So that is how the two are related to each. That's why I told you both of them are the two sides of the same coin, taking a decision and implementing a decision. Knowing what is right and doing what is right. Knowing what is wrong and, well, refrain from doing what is wrong. So that is what psychology often helps us in. So this is how the two are very much related, very closely related to each other. We often say there is a famous quotation of some philosopher. Many philosophers have said similar things, including Gandhi also. But I will paraphrase that in my language, in my topic here. So many philosophers say that ethics without the knowledge of psychology is useless, and knowledge without ethics is dangerous. So that is a beautiful way to understand both of them. Ethics without knowledge, let's see the first part of that quotation. Ethics without knowledge is useless. Ethics without knowledge is useless. What does it mean? Just think of it. Suppose, for example, there is a person who knows ethics very well. He knows what is right and what is wrong very, very effectively, very efficiently. But he is not, so he is able to arrive at a right decision, but his psychology, his knowledge is bad. Because of that, he is not able to implement that decision. So if he knows what is right, but he is never able to implement what is right, do what is right, is that of any use? That is useless. So ethics without the knowledge is useless. On the other hand, knowledge without ethics can be extremely dangerous. Why so? Because there are some people who are very good in the knowledge, but their ethics is problematic. And because of that, such people may arrive at a wrong decision and they can implement the wrong decision very effectively, very efficiently. And remember, wrong thing done efficiently can be extremely dangerous. So such people, for example, can be extremely dangerous. The wrong thing done efficiently, that can be extremely dangerous. Take the case of Hitler, for example. Hitler was very good in implementation. He was a very efficient administrator, a very efficient leader maybe. So he knew how to understand human mind, he knew how to control human mind, he knew how to brainwash people, he knew how to do the propaganda and all, how to gather support from the people, etc. He was very good in all of that. That is what psychology is. But his right and wrong was problematic, and because of that, well, he took a wrong decision, like for example, executing Holocaust, and he implemented that at such a large scale that you know what happened during the Second World War. 6 million Jews were killed by him just because they were Jews. Normal people like me, like you, like anybody. So not political people, not those people who are involved in the politics or combat or fight or war. Common people, normal businessmen, teachers, children, old people, women who had nothing to do with politics. 6 million of them were killed just because they were Jews. And almost equal number of non-Jews also. People who were, you can say, Romans or Slavs, or you can say the disabled people or mentally retarded people, low IQ people, because he thought that they are inferior people and they contaminate the Germanic race, Germanic blood. So almost 6 million Jews and 6 million non-Jews were killed by him, well, just because they did not fulfill his criteria of being a good person. Now, if you remove ethics from all this scenario and just think about its implementation, then don't you realize, don't you think that this was, Holocaust was a tremendously successful act in that case? So just think of it, 12 million people he killed just in a span of around 2 years or so. 12 million people were killed. So to create that whole infrastructure, that bureaucratic infrastructure to execute Holocaust, identify all the Jews in that area or transport them to make that huge concentration camps, make that gas chamber, make that electric chamber, etc., and killing 12 million people, and then after disposing of their body. If you remove ethics from all that, then don't you think it is a great achievement of bureaucracy? It's a great achievement of medical science. It's a great achievement of engineering science. It is actually, but it was such a problematic thing again. So without ethics, knowledge can be extremely dangerous. Holocaust is a classic example of that. Hitler is a good example of that. On the other hand, take the case of Gandhi. Gandhi also knew psychology very well. Nobody perhaps understood human psychology the way Gandhi did. But so Gandhi was very good in understanding the psychology, controlling people and all, but his idea of right and wrong was good. Because of that, he did the right thing at such a large scale that has never been done in the history of humanity, never before Gandhi, never after Gandhi. So idea is that ethics, psychology with ethics can be extremely good, like what Gandhi did, and psychology without ethics can be extremely dangerous, like what Hitler did. That is why you know that in order to lead a good life and successful life and society, good society, etc., it's very important for us to know both philosophy and psychology at the same time. We cannot ignore any of them. That's why you can say, as a prospective civil servant, you must know what is ethics, what is right and wrong, but you must also know how to do the right thing in your personal life as well as in your administrative life, civil service, etc. That is why both of them are required. That is why both of them we need to know. That is why I told you that both of them are the two sides of the same coin. So that is one important thing. If you ask me, for example, to summarize all of that, philosophy and psychology together in a single word, that what can be that possible word which can express the whole idea of ethics, requirement and demand of ethics, then I would say that ethics demands us, requires us from us only one thing. And what is that one thing? Well, that is, I try to use the word think for that. Think is the only thing that ethics requires, ethics demands from us. So, ethics requires from us, both philosophy and psychology, that whenever you are doing something, then stop for a moment and think, what are you doing. If you stop for a moment also and think what you are doing, then you fulfill the primary condition, primary requirement of ethics. So that is what only thing that ethics requires. But thinking, as far as thinking is concerned, then as we will see in our later classes more detail, that about thinking we have a lots of misconception about ourselves. We often say that we think a lot, we are thinking people, we think a lot. But thinking is not that common in the most human beings. Thinking is often a big rarity among people. There is a beautiful quotation of perhaps G.B. Shaw, George Bernard Shaw, one of my favorite author, which I often repeat in my class today also and later class also I will repeat that. G.B. Shaw said that 2% people actually think, 2% only. 2% people think, 3% people think that they think, and 95% people would rather die than to think. That is how he understood, and that appears to be true to a great extent. Percentage may vary, but this idea is very interesting that 2% people only think. 3% people think that they think. They do not think actually, but they have the illusion of thinking. They think that they are thinking, and 95% people don't have that illusion also. Given a choice, they will prefer to die rather than to think. Thinking is so difficult, thinking is so uncommon, thinking is so rare. And it is not only a cliche or top quotation. You can see that in your real life also, in your public life also. Just take the case of Hitler once again. That when Hitler executed his Holocaust, did his Holocaust, then, well, do you think that he alone was responsible for that? No, Hitler had tremendous support in German society. So millions and millions of people in Germany, they all supported Hitler. Hitler was a popular leader, Hitler was a strong person in that case. So a large number of people in Germany supported him. Now question here is that, do you think that all those people in Germany who supported Hitler or who did not protest against Hitler, for example, were they bad people, were they criminals, were they murderers, were they psychopaths, were they monsters? Of course not. They were just, all the Germans were. Germans are not bad people by nature. They are just like anybody, normal people like us. But even then, well, Holocaust happened in Germany during that time. Why did it happen? Only reason is that from our point of view, only reason was that 95% people in Germany, they stopped thinking. They prefer to die or kill rather than to think. So forget about Holocaust. Look at your society also. That look at all those people who commit such a heinous crime when they become part of a mob. That lynching, for example, and all those things. Do they think what they are doing? They don't think. They are simply brainwashed by somebody else, and they blindly follow what is command given to them by many of the terrorists, for example, many of the criminals, for example. Do they think what they are doing? Most often they don't. So 95% people given a choice, they will, you can say, prefer to die rather than to think. Thinking is so rare. So according to some people, very few people in the world, like 2% people, well, they are the people who are most important people in the society. They are 2% people. They are the ones, they create history. They are the ones who move the history. They are the ones, they become the harbinger of making a good society and all. So they create history, they make history. What are these 95% people? These 95% people, they become history. Nobody knows who they are. They are simply born, they live their life, and they simply die. So in history, you can say trillions of people have been born maybe, but 95% of them, you don't even know who they are. They simply born and they simply die again after spending their time that they have on this earth. So 95% people become history. 2% people create history, make history. 95% people become history. What are these 3% people? Well, they disturb history. They create trouble for the people who try to do something good in the society. So they are the most dangerous people. These people are ignorant. Well, being ignorant is okay for us. Knowledge, they are the knowledgeable people. Knowledge is very important, is very good. Ignorance is okay, but these people have the illusion of knowledge. Illusion of knowledge is worse than even the ignorance. They do not know actually, but they think that they know. And because of that, they often create troubles for the majority, for the good people who try to do something good in the society. So ethics requires us to be among those 2% people who actually think. So In our class, we will discuss a lot about that. What exactly is the meaning of thinking? How do we think? When do you think? When do we think that we think? And when we prefer to die rather than to think? All of that we will discuss in our class, that what are those conditions, when do we do like that. So that is what. So basic purpose of ethics is, basic requirement, demand of ethics is that whenever you are doing something, whenever we are doing something, then stop for a moment and, well, think what are you doing. Even if you stop for a moment and think what you are doing, then you will fulfill the maximum, the basic requirement of ethics in a way. I think there is a question, let me see. Sir, is this contemporary time in France which is happening in wrong ethics or wrong psychology? Biswajit. Yes, Biswajit, what is happening in France is because of those 95% people maybe. As I told you that 95% people would rather die than to think. It is such a stupid thing that they are doing in France again, you know. If you think about it, that one innocent person was killed and you are killing other innocent people to protest against the killing of one innocent person. Is that logical? Is that, can say, do they think what they are doing actually? No. So, any act of violence is highly, you can say, we will talk about a lot about that in our later classes, but it is just the absence of thinking. People stop thinking. So, it is so illogical. Just think of, to protest against a death of an innocent person, you are killing other innocent persons. That is where the problem comes up. So, this is what we can say is happening in France there as well. So, that is the requirement of ethics in a way, both philosophy as well as psychology. They are the two major part of your syllabus. And in these two major part of your syllabus, I will not recommend you any books to read beyond the classroom. Whatever we are going to do in the classroom will be more than enough. Nothing else is required. We are doing much more extensively, much more widely about all these things in our class throughout the course here. So, we will talk about that a little more shortly. Now, this is one important thing. Then after third part of your syllabus that will be there is the application of all of that in administration or governance. Administration of all of that, philosophy and psychology into the governance, because ultimately all of you are going to be a civil servant administrator. So, you must know how can you use your understanding of philosophy and psychology in order to become a good administrator, a good civil servant. That will be application part. Though application, remember, the way we are going to discuss in our class, most of the application will be done with philosophy and psychology itself, because application to a great extent cannot be separated from the theory. So, we will be talking about a lot of application in the philosophy class also and in the psychology class also, but towards the end of the course we will discuss a little of application separately as well, where some topics which may not be covered here will be discussed separately in that part. So, last few class will be about application, including the case studies, etc. That is what we will be discussing. And since this part of your syllabus is about application in the real life, so it is in this part of your syllabus that I may recommend you to read some books, some extra material, some extra, well, study and all. So, newspapers for example. So, it is in application part that you need to be in touch with the newspapers, magazines, current events, or the happenings in your society around, all around, that you see every day. So, that is what we have to do. So, for example, so theoretical aspect we will discuss in our class, but some of that application you have to learn yourself by reading the books, extra material, etc. For example, you know, 2 years ago, the Parliament has passed a Surrogacy Regulation Act. Now, in our class, we will discuss the ethical issues involved in the cases of surrogacy here, but what are the provisions of that law you may have to read in the newspaper. Or for example, can say a few years ago, again Parliament has passed whistleblower protection law bill. So, in our class, we will discuss the ethical idea behind the whistleblowing, but so that is a part of our course, but the provision of that law you may have to read in the newspapers, etc. Or for example, last year again the Parliament has amended the MTP Act, Medical Termination of Pregnancy Act, commonly known as abortion law. Now, ethical issues involved in the abortion we will discuss in our class, but what are the provisions of that law, that act, you may have to read in the newspapers, etc. So, or almost 10 years ago, again the Parliament has passed a POSH Act, the Prevention of Sexual Harassment at Workplace Act, sexual harassment law as we call. Now, in our class, we will discuss the cases of sexual harassment, the ethical base, you can say, issues involved in the cases of sexual harassment here. Because sexual harassment has become an extremely important topic in ethics in these days, particularly in India after that Me Too movement, when some high profile people in India, public life, they were accused by women of some cases of sexual harassment like Tarun Tejpal or MJ Akbar or R.K. Pachauri. So they were powerful people in the society, but they were accused of sexual harassment by some people, and it became Me Too movement at that time. And more recently, that wrestlers protest that was going on just a few weeks ago in Delhi. There are some powerful people, like you can say the head of the Wrestler Federation of WFI in India, who was accused of sexual harassment. So, idea here is that we will discuss the ethical issues involved in such cases of sexual harassment. That is a part of our course, our discussion, but the provision of that law you may have to read in the newspapers and all. So, the idea here is that we will discuss the ethical background of all these issues in our class. But well, sometimes when the new events happen in the society, then it's important for you to keep your eyes open. Read the newspaper, which otherwise also you would be reading every day, part of your preparation. Keep ethics in mind for that. So, that is a part of a syllabus where you can say the extra books will be required, extra material will be required. One study material that I often recommend to my students that you must read, we will talk about that in a later class once again, would be the fourth report of second ARC. Fourth report of the second ARC. So, that is the one important report that I often recommend. Not read all the reports, you can Google it out, ARC, second ARC, you can find the page here, Government of India website, download that. So, there are 13 or 15 reports are there, you do not have to read all of them, you have to take only fourth report. Name of that report itself is Ethics in Governance. So, in that report you will get many ideas that we will be exploring in these topics also with reference to the administration and governance. So, that is a good report that I often recommend to my students that they must read it. So, this is what you have to read for that. Except for that, well, for major part of our course, whatever we are going to discuss in the classroom will be more than sufficient. Nothing else is required. So, this is interesting thing about ethics normally. Ethics has 250 marks, in your exam, but in ethics you can say in order to score very good, ethics is a highly scoring paper, you may be aware that if you study ethics well, then it is easy in ethics that you can get as much as you can see 140 marks, 150 marks. Many students have got very high good marks in ethics. So, no other paper can give you that marks 140, 150 out of 250. But in ethics not only it is possible, but it is very easy also to score good marks. So, ethics is a highly scoring paper, number one, but more importantly, in order to score very good in ethics, you do not have to read many books and all. You don't have to read many books, you don't have to, well, update yourself again and again about the ethical issues and all. So, that is interesting thing about ethics. This makes ethics very different from other paper, because in all other paper, you can see the addition of new knowledge is always required. Suppose for example, your economy class is over and next year the budget comes, economic survey comes, you have to read that budget once again. You cannot simply say that my preparation is complete, I will not read anything more. So, in your science tech, for example, when this gravitational wave has been, you can say, observed recently, that universe humming, well, you have to read that again. You cannot simply say that my science tech is complete. So, in other paper, you have to keep yourself updated about the new things that happen in the society. In ethics, that will not be required. Once your preparation is complete, it is complete once and for all. You don't have to revise yourself, you don't have to add something new to that, you don't have to update your information. Why so? It is interesting, because in ethics, ethical questions normally do not change. That is very interesting thing. In all other subject, questions keep on changing. But in ethics, questions don't change. Ethical questions do not change. Just think of it. 2500 years ago, Buddha was asking some important question about human life. What was the question that Buddha was asking? I hope all of you are aware of that. Buddha was asking this question that why do people suffer? Why do we suffer? What is the cause of human suffering? How can we eliminate suffering? And how can we become happy? So he was asking these important questions. Are we not asking the same question 2500 years later today also? Of course, yes. So then also Buddha was asking certain questions, and 2500 years later today also we are asking the same question, why do we suffer? What is the cause of our suffering? How can we eliminate our suffering? How can we become happy? So ethical questions do not change. Questions remain same. But more interestingly, ethical answers also do not change. Ethical answers also do not change. Just think of it. So what question Buddha asked 2500 years ago, we are asking the same question today also. But more importantly, what answer Buddha gave to us at that time, we are, you can say, those answers are valid even today. You cannot say that Buddha's answer are old answer. They are not relevant now. No, they are as relevant today as they were at the time of Buddha. Think of it, 2200 years ago in ancient Greece, well, Aristotle was asking similar question about human life, that what is the meaning of a good life, how to lead a good life and all. We are asking the same question today, but more importantly, what answer Aristotle gave to us at that time, those answers are valid even today. Aristotle's answer in other subject is totally useless. Aristotle gave, you must be aware that Aristotle gave us a theory of physics also, a theory of chemistry also, a theory of biology also. But those answers given by him about physics, chemistry and biology are, well, all childish answer. Even a 6th grade student know today that Aristotle was wrong in physics. Even 5th standard student knows today that Aristotle was wrong in biology. That is why you don't study Aristotle in your physics class or in your biology. Do you study Aristotle in your physics class, in your biology class? Of course not. His answers are totally wrong. But ethics, we study Aristotle today also. So the idea here is that, well, ethical questions do not change and ethical answers also do not change. We will study Aristotle also in our class. We will study Buddha also in our class. So ethical questions and ethical answers, both of them do not change. They remain same throughout the ages, throughout the centuries. So that is the importance, that is the beauty of ethics in that sense. So that is why you can say that in ethics you have to, your preparation, you should give more importance to very important place ethics will play in your success. But in ethics you can study less and you can score very good. Least amount of study can give you maximum marks in ethics if you study ethics appropriately. If you study ethics according to what we are going to explore in our class. So it is a highly, you can say, scoring paper. It can play the most important role perhaps in your success in the UPSC exam. That is one important thing about ethics. Try to maximize your score. That is one thing that you have to focus a lot on. That is one important thing. Now, before we end this topic and go to the main study, main course that we have to explore, one more thing I would like to talk about. That how to score good marks in ethics. What is it that you have to do in order to score? I will say that in order to score good marks in ethics, you have to fulfill two important conditions. If you fulfill these two important conditions, then be sure ethics is very easy to prepare and score in your exam. Out of these two conditions, one condition you have to fulfill yourself. I hope that you already do that. Second one is what we are going to discuss in our class. So, first important thing that you have to, can say, condition that you have to fulfill in order to score good in ethics is that you should have a respectable command over the language. In your case, of course, it is English language because you are preparing in English medium. So you must have a good command over the English language. That is a primary requirement. Because remember, language is important for any other subject. Even if you are writing, because ultimately language is what you have to write in. Even if you study polity or geography, you have to write your answer only in. So in that case, so even if you are writing polity or economy, geography, etc., you have to write that in English only. But in ethics, English becomes even more important because well, ethical subjects, ethical issues are very abstract, and something which is so abstract to can say express that in the form of a language, can say answer, requires a comparatively good command over the language. So your English must be good, your language must be good. But when I say that your language should be good, then I do not mean that your language should be Shakespeare's language, poetic language, literary language. No, that's not what I mean. Good language, according to our understanding, must fulfill two important criteria. First of all, your language must be clear. Clarity is very important. Clarity of language, clarity of word, clarity of thought. Because language is what? Language is we often say that language is the vehicle of thought. Whatever is in your mind, what you reproduce on the paper, and what your examiner understand. These three things must be more or less consistent. They must overlap together. How much they overlap, this is what we call the clarity. So what you write, what you think, what you write, and what the other person understands, all the three must be same, more or less. So that is what we call the clarity of language. That must be there. Do not write vague language, do not write ambiguous language, do not write word that may have multiple meanings. So one thing is the clarity of language, and second important thing is that language must be very simple. I have seen many students, in order to impress their examiner, they try to write in a very complex language, very complex manner. That we should try to avoid. Do not try to show your linguistic ability. Nobody is interested in that. People are only interested in how clearly you can express yourself. So write very simple language, write short sentences, do not write long sentences. That will make your language unclear also, and it will make your answer more prone to grammatical mistake, which you should try to avoid. So write, you can say simple language, small sentences, do not use many conjunction, use can say full stop in place of that, and do not use very complex word. Do not write the language of Shashi Tharoor, for example, because Shashi Tharoor's language, maybe it's good to read sometimes and make, you can say, enjoy and amuse ourselves, but it is not a good language to write your answer in. So if you are writing you are using such a complex word in your answer, which the examiner has to consult a dictionary to understand your answer, then you may be in trouble. Do not write very complex word. Write very simple word, day-to-day language. Remember always that you are doing general studies. You are not studying philosophy as an optional or psychology as an optional. So it must be general, that any educated person should be able to understand what you want to write. So that is one important thing that you need to keep in mind. Language must be simple. So first requirement is that your language should be good. I hope that you already fulfill that condition. So evaluate your linguistic ability. If your language is good, be happy. But if your language is not that good, then well, work upon your language. That is very important. Number one. Then after, second important thing that you have to do is that, well, which is our domain, this is what we will be doing in our class, that you have to learn, you have to have good command over, again, what I call language of ethics. You should have a good command over the language of ethics. So as we will see shortly, that every subject has its own language. Every subject. I often like to say, whenever you study a new subject, you are essentially studying a new language. So language is very important. Every subject has its own. And same word may have different language in different subject. So for example, just take a small example. Think of it. Suppose if we use the word force. Then suppose for example, if a physics student uses the term force in a physics classroom, and when a military man uses the word force at Siachen or LAC, for example, or when a policeman uses the force at the traffic junction, do they mean the same thing? Word is same, but do they mean the same thing? Of course not. So for a physics student, force is simply mass into acceleration. but force is altogether something else for a military man at Siachen. It may be something else for a policeman on the road, traffic junction, or force will have very different meaning in our class also. In ethics also we will use the force. No, we will not use force, we will use the concept of force. But meaning of force in our class will be very different than the meaning of force in a physics class. So, idea here is that every subject has its own language, every subject has its own terminology. That is what you have to learn. And as far as language of ethics is concerned, then the way I like to understand ethics, that there are around 100 or so different concepts are there. Concepts are there, or you can say words are there, or ideas are there, or words are there which form the language of ethics. 100 or so concept. Each word that we study here is actually a concept, is actually an idea. So 100 or so different words are there which constitute the language of ethics. Words, for example, we will discuss all of them in our class. Words, for example, well, social contract, law, or we can say happiness, liberty, consent, deontology, autonomy, duty, dignity, human rights, or choice, responsibility, virtue, vice, self-awareness, self-control, self-confidence, trust, truthfulness, commitment, you can say so many, optimism or empathy, compassion, leadership. So many terms, accountability. So many terms are there. So these terms constitute the language of ethics from our point of view. So this is what you have to buy, and our class is basically about that. Our class is more about the language of ethics. So what you are going to do in this class, I am not going to teach you ethics as such. Ethics, I believe, I know all of you are aware of that. Ethics is not something the way we understand ethics is not something that we need to be taught. So I don't teach ethics as such. What I teach in my classroom is the language of ethics. What you already know, well, how can you express that in a form of a specific, exact, clear language? So that language of ethics is something that I will help you to develop in the next many weeks. Normal language you should know yourself, you should work upon yourself. Language of ethics is what we are going to talk about. This is what we will be studying in our class. Well, let me see. I think one or two questions are there. Shiladitya, sir, how many moral thinkers do we need to study? Well, let us see that how much we can do. We will discuss at least 10, 15, the most important one. But important thing that we have to understand is that moral thinkers are not very important. Ideas are more important. So we will discuss basically ideas, and in the ideas we will use the ideas of many thinkers. Thinkers will come within the framework of an idea. Our class will not be divided in the thinkers. Our class will be mostly divided in terms of, will be studied in a idea concept wise. So conceptually we will talk about some idea in which many thinkers will be there. Second idea, many thinkers will be there. Third idea, many more thinkers will be there. So we will not be discussing thinkers separately as such. We will discuss the different ideas. Thinkers will be a vehicle of understanding those ideas. So those ideas are important. We will see about that. Another question was, sir, can we use Bengali or Sanskrit quotes in ethics in English medium? If yes, can we write in Bengali or Sanskrit or English this quote? First of all, write the spelling of quote correctly. It is not C-O-T-E-S, Q-U-O-T-E-S, quotes. So your language must be good, your spelling must also be correct. Well, you can write Bengali also, you can write Sanskrit also, and in your normal Bengali script also or Devanagari script also. But one thing that I will suggest, that whenever you write a Bengali or Sanskrit or Hindi quotes, for example, then write in Bengali, and then after in bracket translate that into English. That must be done. In my class also you will see that I may possibly use some Sanskrit verse also, some Hindi can say quote also, but every time when I will translate at the same time that into English. That must be done. So you can use Bengali language also, Sanskrit also, Hindi also, Urdu also, whatever you are comfortable in. You can use the same script also, but you must translate that into English then and there only in bracket. You cannot assume that your examiner knows Bengali or Hindi or Sanskrit. So that is something that you can do, but otherwise it is advisable that you can, if you remember that some quotes, for example, some verse, for example, some poem, for example, some song, for example, which you think is very relevant for that topic, then you can use that. Now do translate that into English at the same time, at the same place itself in bracket. So that is what you can do there. So that is how we can say you can score good marks in ethics here. So that is all about the introduction of the syllabus, maybe a course maybe. Now we will start with the actual part of our course, which I told you that we are going to start with the philosophy part, first important part of our course. So let us start with the philosophy now. So in philosophy, of course, as I told you, we are going to start with the ethics. So write down first of all a basic definition of ethics here. Write down firstly, ethics is our understanding of right and wrong, ethics is our understanding of right and wrong and good and bad. Ethics is our understanding of right and wrong and good and bad, and finding out the reasons for the same. And finding out the reasons for the same. So that is the first important thing, that this is how we can have a very simple, common day-to-day language, non-technical definition of ethics. So this definition, as you can see, has two important parts. First part of that definition was that ethics is our understanding of right and wrong and good and bad. In a later class, we will differentiate between, we learn the difference between right and good and wrong and bad. That we will discuss in later class, but as of now, right now, you can understand from this word the way you know them. All of you know that the meaning of these two words here. So first of all, ethics is our understanding of right and wrong and good and bad. What is right and what is wrong, and what is good and what is bad. Now as far as you all know, as far as understanding of right and wrong is concerned, then everybody in the world knows what is right and what is wrong. Right and wrong is not something that can be taught to a person, that needs to be taught to a person in a classroom like this. So right and wrong is a part. We often say that right and wrong, understanding of right and wrong is a part of the human mind, human nature. Human mind has evolved in such a manner that whenever we see something, whenever we do something, think of it, whenever we do something or whenever we see somebody else doing something, then our mind has a natural ability, natural tendency to divide our action or somebody else's action into the strict categories of right and wrong, that this is right and that is wrong, strict categories. So human mind always decides. So whenever we see an action, ours or somebody else's, we always judge, we always evaluate, and we always have a tendency to express our judgment or our evaluation. So that is an important thing about the human nature. Human mind cannot be neutral. Whenever we think about any action, we often think about right and wrong. So it is not something that has to be taught. Everybody knows about the rights and wrongs in his life. That's why it is interesting sometimes that when I tell some of my friends who are not in the field of UPSC that I teach ethics to my students, then they laugh at me. What do you teach in ethics? Do you teach them that yes, always speak the truth, don't kill people, don't harm people, don't cheat people, or keep your promise, always speak? So this is something that you teach to your student. Now are these things you need to be taught in a classroom where a teacher can tell you that okay, always speak the truth, don't kill people? No, this is not something that you need to be taught. That's why many people say, what is there in ethics to teach? What is there in ethics to study? I tell my friends that I don't teach ethics as such. Only thing that I teach is the, well, I already told you, language of ethics. So I will only help my student to have develop a language through which they can express their idea of right and wrong. Right and wrong is not something that you need to be taught. It is something that we all know. So right and wrong everybody knows in the world. This is the one of the defining characteristics of human mind. You know, philosophers, when they try to define a human being, I told you earlier that philosophers often try to define a human being. Earlier, one definition I had already given you, that human beings are, according to some philosopher, decision making animals. Another definition you can think of is that many philosophers say that human beings are ethical animals. Now that is interesting thing. When I say that human beings are ethical animal, then I do not mean that we always do the right thing. No, we do the wrong also. We all do the wrong sometimes or the other in our life. So being ethical does not mean that doing right. When I say that we are ethical animal, then I simply mean that whenever we do something, then we think about our action being right or wrong. This ability of the human being, this tendency of the human being to think about their actions to be right or wrong is something that is uniquely human. No other animal appears to have this ability. A dog, for example, after barking at a stranger, it does not sit under a tree and think, did I do the right thing or not? No, they do not. They simply bark and they move ahead. We, on the other hand, when we bark at, when we no, we don't bark, we shout. When we shout at a person in extreme anger, then, well, we do sit somewhere at the end of it and we think, did I do the right thing or not? Sometimes we realize, no, I did the wrong thing. I should not have shouted like this. We feel sorry about it. We say sorry, apologize to that person also. So, or sometimes we decide, no, I did the right thing. This person deserved my shouting. In either case, you become ethical. Even if you thought that your shouting was wrong, then also at least you thought about wrong. That makes you an ethical. Your action may be wrong, but you become an ethical person. So, it is the ethical animal in that sense. So, that's how we often say that human beings are ethical animal. Every human being has this ability, this tendency, this, we can say, inclination to think about right and wrong, and everybody has some rights and some wrongs. Even the worst person in the world, even a person like Osama bin Laden, for example, well, he was a very bad person, maybe he did many wrong, but even then he had, as an ethical person, he had the idea of it. Suppose, for example, when he blew up the World Trade Center, Osama bin Laden, when he blew up the World Trade Center, then of course it was a very wrong act. It was a terrorist act, it killed so many people. It was very wrong for all of us. But still, when he was doing it, he did think that he was doing the right thing. Ask him, or Al-Qaeda members, or his sympathizers today, then did he do the right thing? They will still say that he did the right thing. So even a person like Osama bin Laden, for example, well, he thought that he was doing the right thing. Even a criminal, when they do some heinous crime like murder and rape also, well, they still think about whether they are doing right or wrong. So right and wrong is a part of human nature. Our rights and wrong may differ, as we have just now seen. What is right for me, it can be wrong for you, or vice versa. What is right for a Hindu may be wrong for a Muslim, or vice versa. What is right for an Indian may be wrong for a Chinese, or vice versa. What is right for a saint can be wrong for a criminal, or vice versa. So different people have different rights and different wrongs, but fact still is that everybody in the world has some right and some wrong. So human being can never exist without thinking about right and wrong. This is something that makes us unique in the animal kingdom. We are ethical animal in that sense. Further, if you look at a normal society, then on some issue of right and wrong, we often agree with each other. So we all know, for example, that some actions are universally right. For example, we all know that speaking truth is right and lying is wrong. We all know that keeping your promise is right and breaking your promise is wrong. We all know that saving the life of a person is right and killing an innocent person is wrong. So on these right and wrong, there is a universal agreement among the human species. All of us know that these are rights and these are wrongs. But on other rights and wrongs, there are controversies. There are disagreements. What may be right for me, it may be wrong for you. So there are two types of rights and wrong. One is something that is universally acceptable by most of the people in the society, and some others, well, in which people differ from each other. What is right for a Hindu may be wrong for a Muslim. There may be disagreement about what is right for them in that case. But fact is that we all have our rights and our wrongs. So, ethics, first of all, first important aspect of ethics is that ethics requires us to be, first of all, clear about that right and wrong. As we will see in our class, maybe in the next class today itself, that about the right and wrong, we often have a lot of, well, a lack of clarity in general. So, that clarity might be missing in us. We will give you some example of that shortly. But nevertheless, fact is that, so ethics requires us to be a little more clear about right and wrong, number one. But ethics does not stop at identifying the right and wrong itself. Let me see, there was a question. Nayan, sir, something is right or wrong depends on one's knowledge of right and wrong. For one person, something may right and same may be wrong for another person. How to tackle a question if there is a situation like this? That is the whole purpose of the class here, Nayan. This is what we will be exploring in the next many weeks. So, hold on for this question. This question will keep on coming up throughout. So, the ethics first of all requires us to understand right and wrong, but ethics does not stop at that only. Ethics goes beyond that also, that, well, and tries to find out the reason for that right and wrong also. So, ethics also requires us to know that if something is right, then why is it right? If something is wrong, then why is it wrong? Or if something that is right, is it always right? Or something that is wrong, is it always wrong? Or can there be a situation in which a right can become wrong also and wrong can become right also? If yes, under what condition? So ethics requires us to know these things and go into a deeper aspect of these questions and ask more controversial question, more deeper question about the same thing. So for example, just think of it. Suppose for example, we all know that killing a person is wrong. But how many of you think that killing a person like say Ajmal Kasab was also wrong? Ajmal Kasab was a terrorist. He killed so many people in Mumbai. That was very wrong. We all know that. But ultimately, what did we do? We also killed him. That was death penalty, capital punishment is a. So, so ultimately capital punishment is also a killing. We also killed him. So, how many of you think that that killing was also wrong? How many, I mean, how many of you think that death penalty, capital punishment should be completely abolished from India? Now, when I ask this question in my physical classroom, then a large number of students say that no sir, it is justified. Capital, very few students say that sir, it is right that it should be abolished. So, you know, a few years ago, last previous law commission, you may be aware of that also. The previous law commission has given a recommendation that in India we should abolish the capital punishment completely in all the cases except one. Can you tell me what was that exception? I hope that some of you may have figured out that the law commission has suggested that we should retain capital punishment only and only on the charge of terrorism. Only for terrorism, which on the charge of terrorism, we should have death penalty, and for all other cases, we should abolish the death penalty. But if I ask you that even for the sake of terrorism, let us not have death penalty, would you agree with that? If you agree, then there is a consistency in your thought that yes, the killing is always wrong, even if the killing is that of a terrorist like Ajmal Kasab. But if you think that no, death penalty should not be abolished, it must be retained, then well, you have to do a little rethinking or deeper thinking maybe, because ultimately, so when Ajmal Kasab killed people in Mumbai, then that was wrong, but when ultimately we killed him, then that was right. Why so? Under what condition even an act of killing somebody can become right? So that is a deeper question that you have to answer, that we have to ask. So ethics requires us to ask those deeper questions and tries to answer that as well. So there are two aspects of a study of ethics. One is that understanding what is right and wrong and finding out the reasons for that. What makes right right and what makes wrong wrong, and what makes right wrong sometimes and wrong right sometimes. In a way you can say ethics requires us to ask and answer two important questions about life. First question is what is right and wrong, and second question is why is it right or wrong. There is a third question also, how to do the right, which we will discuss in the psychology class. That is a more science question rather than the ethics question. So there are the two important questions that we need to ask and answer. What is right or wrong? Why is it right or wrong? Understanding of that is what is the ultimate purpose of studying ethics as a subject. So that is how we define ethics as such. We often find ourselves in between ethics and morals, and sometimes we find it in diplomacy too. Kindly elaborate, Brunald. Yes, Brunald, we will keep on elaborating that throughout the course. When we will study ethics, then one of the important purpose that we will be trying to fulfill is that how to handle these controversial questions of right and wrong. So right now, keep yourself just limited to this thing that yes, what ethics actually does. Ethics tries to understand what is right and wrong and tries to understand the reason. Because once you understand the reason of that, then we can make a better argument, better convincing way to understand what is right and what is wrong. We will be discussing these things throughout our course here. So that is how we can understand, that is how we can define ethics here. Now change the paragraph and then after write further. Thus ethics is a normative subject which tries to find out to identify certain norms of right behavior. Thus ethics is a normative subject which tries to identify certain norms of right behavior. Certain norms of right behavior. So this is the next important thing. The idea here is that we often say that ethics is a normative subject. What is the meaning of the term normative subject? As we will see in the next topic shortly, that there are two types of subjects are there. Knowledge, discipline is there, knowledge is there. One is called scientific knowledge and the other is called normative knowledge. Ethics is the most important normative knowledge. Now what the normative study does? Normative studies help us to identify certain norms. What are these norms? Well, these norms can be certain standard. These norms can be certain, you can see the criteria maybe, or these norms can be certain values. Certain values maybe. Now what these norms actually do? These norms help us to clarify our choice in the case of moral controversy. Suppose for example, well at one point of time you have two choices in front of you, A and B, and you have to make decision in favor of one rather than the other. And suppose you are confused, you are not able to decide what is right and what is wrong. Now in such a case you can see, so you are confused, you are totally in dilemma, you are in doubt, you are in confusion. In such a confusion or such a doubtful situation, these norms often help us to take a decision. Suppose for example, if this norm is consistent with your you can say this choice, then we often consider that as the right action. And if this norm is inconsistent with your choice, then we consider that as wrong. So in ethics, we try to identify certain norms which can clarify our choice or we can tell us what is right and what is wrong. Norms of right behavior, norms of wrong behavior. So that is what we try to do in ethics. So both the last two questions that were asked by these two people, Nayan and Brunald, I think, is basically about that. So if you are able to understand the norm, then it will be much easier for you to resolve such a diplomatic situation or dilemma. That what is right, because very often you can say problem in the life occurs when more than one choices are there, Both of them appear to be right in some way and both of them appear to be wrong also in some way. Sir, if capital punishment is vile and needs abolition, how can the Guantanamo Bay prison facility be justified? Which of the two is ethical? Well, we will discuss that again. So, which of the two is ethical, that will depend on which norm you follow. So, this is what we are trying to discuss in the whole course. So, very often it happens that some people think that that is right, some people think that this is where the controversy occurs. And in such a situation, ethics help us to identify certain universal norm which can guide us to do this or that. That is the whole purpose of ethics. This is what we will be doing throughout the course. So, that is what we can see ethics tries to do. Ethics is, this is the meaning of that term that I told you earlier, that ethics is a normative subject which tries to identify certain norms of right behavior, so that by using that norm we can be clear what is to be done and what is to be avoided. That is what is the purpose of ethics. Now, from this point of view, you will see ethics is very different from all other subjects perhaps that you study. Let us talk about how ethics differs from the other subjects. Let us call, for the sake of simplicity of the argument, let us call all other subjects that you study as a science. Scientific subject and the normative subject, which is ethics. There are other normative subjects also which we will see later, maybe in the next class or tomorrow maybe, but ethics is the most important normative study, normative discipline. So, the question next is that how ethics differs from the other subject, other knowledge, other branches of knowledge. Let us call that. When I say science, then I don't only mean physics and chemistry. I mean all other knowledge also, like you can say political science or anthropology or psychology or sociology or economics or, well, geography. All of them are scientific knowledge in that sense. So, how is it that ethics differs from those scientific branch of our knowledge? Let us talk about that again. There can be some question on this topic. It is a very common question in ethics paper. Suppose, for example, there is a question that write a short note on science and morality, or some other questions also can be there, which I will tell you some idea later on. So, there can be some question about the difference between science and morality, interrelatedness between them, connection between the two. So, let us talk about how the two are different first. Now, if you look at science, for example, then we often say that science is descriptive. Science is descriptive by nature. Science is descriptive by nature in the sense that in science we try to describe the phenomena or event that we try to study. Description is the domain, description is the, well, purpose. Ethics, on the other hand, does not describe. More than being descriptive, we say that ethics is prescriptive. Ethics is prescriptive in the sense that in the case of ethics, we do not describe the event or phenomena. We prescribe what is right and wrong. So, that is what we call ethics in a way. In this sense, ethics is more closer to what doctors do to you. When you have a physical problem, for example, and you go to a doctor, the doctor gives you a prescription, take this medicine, it will can secure you, do not take that medicine, that will make you unhealthy. Or a doctor may tell you eat this food that make you healthy and don't eat that food that is unhealthy for you. Ethics also does the same thing. Ethics tells you do this, it will make you your life a good life, it will make you to lead a good life, don't do that, it will make you to lead a bad life. So, ethics is about prescription of a good life, how to lead a good life, how to avoid leading a bad life, the way doctor gives you prescription about a healthy or unhealthy life. So, in this sense, we say that ethics is not descriptive, it is more prescriptive, number one. Secondly, in ethics in science, after describing the phenomena, science always tries to explain that. explain. Science is more about explanation, finding out the cause of event. If something happens, why does it happen? Cause of that. Ethics, on the other hand, does not explain. More than explaining, ethics justifies the event, the behavior. Science explains and ethics justifies. Both of them, remember, ask the question why. Why does it happen? But answer of science is very different, because answer of science is explanation and answer of ethics is description. Science tries to find out a cause of a behavior. Ethics tries to find out the reason of a behavior. We'll discuss in a later class what is the difference between a cause and reason. That, remember, ethics is more about reason, science is more about causation, finding out a cause of an event. It explains and that justifies. Further, after explaining it, science always tries to make a prediction about a future event based on the explanation and description of the present. So, for example, well, that's why we often say that science is predictive in nature. It predicts a future event, a future phenomena. Ethics, on the other hand, is not predictive. More than being predictive, ethics is always directive. So, in ethics, we try to give a direction of a change rather than a blind prediction of a future event in a way, uncontrolled or you can say the manipulable prediction. In this case, we try to manipulate the future in order to bring about a certain directional change. Suppose, for example, if you ask a scientist this question, that if I leave this marker like this one, what will happen? Well, first of all, science will describe the height of this marker, mass, you can say the weight or shape, size, etc., etc. Then after, it will predict that it will go down rather than it will go up, and it can make a complete prediction that, well, how long it will take to reach the ground, what will be its velocity just before reaching the ground, touching the ground, what will be, how much sound will be created, how much heat will be generated, etc., etc. Everything will be predicted by science accurately. Not only that, science will also explain it, that why will it fall down rather than going up. Science will say that it will fall down rather than going up because of a law of gravity, and it can give you complete explanation of the nature of the gravity. That force of gravity is basically force between two objects with certain mass, F g into F mm upon r square, etc., etc. So, science can give you a complete explanation for that. That is a scientific prediction, scientific explanation, or scientific description. In ethics, on the other hand, we might possibly say, okay, it is going down, but I don't want it to go down. I want it to go up. That's why we invented aeroplane. That's why we invented the rocket maybe. So, ethics is more about direction rather than prediction. Science can only predict it can go down. Ethics will say, no, I want to change the direction of the prediction future, and I want to go up rather than that. And that will create a whole process that we will discuss later on. So, ethics is more than being predictive, ethics is directive. If you look at these three fundamental differences between science and morality, then you can see that science is mostly concerned with the real world. Science is mostly concerned with the real world. So, describing the real event, explaining that, predicting that. Ethics, on the other hand, is not essentially about a real world or real event. More than real, ethics is essentially about an ideal. Ethics is more about the real and ideal. So, ethics is more about real, ideal rather than real. So, that is the next important thing that we have to remember. So, ethics always talks about certain ideal which we want, which may or may not be possible in the reality. And this is one of the very important things that you have to remember throughout the course, because in many classroom, whenever I discuss some of the grand theory of ethics in the classroom, then many students tell me, say that, sir, this theory is very impractical. Do not ask this question in my class. Why not? Because being practical or impractical is not a, we can say, is not a problem for, is not a concern for ethics. Practicality is never a concern of ethics. Whose problem is practicality? Science. Science has to bother about practical or impractical. We as an ethical thinker do not have to bother about practically and impracticality. Well, practical and impractical we may have to talk about in the psychology class later on. Psychology is more like science, but in philosophy part, ethics part, well, we do not have to bother much about the practical. Even if it is impractical, even if it is an ideal, then also that is what we try to study. So ethics is not about real world, ethics is more about the ideal world. That is one important thing that we need to remember. There is a question again. Vidisha Sarkar, sir, I think capital punishment should be banned, as by giving capital punishment we are encouraging the concept of some people are incorrigible. Whereas I think our aim should be to give everybody an opportunity to change, and by giving them the opportunity, the judiciary will maintain its faith on humanity. Yes, Vidisha Sarkar, you are very right. Many people like me also believe in a similar thing, but that is a controversial thing because many people do not think like that. We'll discuss that in a later part. There. Next question, sir, as you said, ethics is more about decision making. As a normal human being, sometimes at heat of the moment we make decisions of our self-interest or what we feel right. So should we calculate the overall consequence before making any decision? That we'll discuss throughout the course, how to make a decision. As I told you that this course is all about that, philosophy part, first 8-9 days. So 8 days will be first 8 days class will be just about how to make decisions. So sometimes we can make decision on the basis of best calculation of overall consequence. What is that consequence also, that you have to be more clear about. We'll discuss all of that tomorrow onwards. Next question, Biswajit. What is the difference between cause and reason? We'll discuss again that, as I told you that in one class later on we will discuss cause and reason. So cause, here only thing that you can understand here, remember that finding out cause is a scientific endeavor and understanding the reason is an ethical effort. That is what we have to remember right now. Later on, we will discuss more of that. It is an empirical world and that is more rational thing. Cause is more empirical and it is reason is more rational. We will discuss empirical and rational in a later class, maybe 3-4 days later. So that is real and ideal. So because if you look at all of these things, then further we can say that science is more about fact. Understanding the fact, describing the fact, explaining the fact, predicting the fact. Science is more about fact. Ethics, on the other hand, is not essentially about fact. More than about fact, ethics is about value. So value means what is right and what is wrong. Degree of rightness and wrongness of a thing is called value. So in philosophy we call that as fact value problem. So where does fact begin end, and from where value, domain of value actually begin? But this distinction you have to remember that science is more about fact and ethics is more about value. Though the two interact with each other, which we will see shortly. But this is one important thing. And because of all these differences that we have seen just now, you will see nature of the questions that we ask in ethics is very different from the nature of the question that we ask and answer in science. Questions also differ. What is that? Scientific questions, if you look at it, is always in the form of is. Is, was, will be, can be, etc., etc. Scientific question is always in some form of is. Ethical questions, on the other hand, is never in the form of is. Ethical questions are always in the form of out, or in more common language, should. Out is the word that we often use in the philosophy, but commonly you can use the word should also for that. So ethical questions are always in the form of should, out. We call this in philosophy is out problem. It is also one of the major question of discussion in the field of philosophy, ethics and all, is out. Scientific questions are always in the form of is, and ethical questions are always in the form of out. So for example, if you can say look at any question that is asked from you, that what is the operative phrase or verb in that word. Looking at the word itself, you can decide whether it is a scientific question or it is an ethical question. and on the basis of that you have to answer it, approach it differently. Suppose for example, if I ask you this question, that what will happen if an atom bomb is dropped on a city like Hiroshima? What will happen if an atom bomb is dropped on a city like Hiroshima? Then it is a scientific question. Why so? Because it contains an edge, a form of edge. What will happen? So it is a scientific question. So a scientist can give you complete answer to that question. A scientist can tell you that if you drop an atom bomb on a city like Hiroshima, then how much heat will be generated, how much radiation will be generated, how many people will die, how big area will be affected, what will be its impact on the animals, wildlife, environment, trees, plants, future generation, genetic mutation. Everything can be answered by science appropriately. How can scientists answer that question? By doing experiment in a physics lab or by doing calculation on a computer. So by doing experiment in a lab or calculation on a computer, a scientist can answer that question very effectively, very accurately, because it is a scientific question. On the other hand, if you ask a slightly different question, that should we drop an atom bomb on a city like Hiroshima or not? That becomes an ethical question. Now this question cannot be answered. Can you answer this question in a physics lab by doing experiment? Should we drop an atom bomb or not? Can you answer this question by doing calculation in a computer? Of course not. This question, computers can help us maybe, but decision about that, answer to that question can be taken, can be found only and only in the human mind. Only a human being can answer that question, that should we drop an atom bomb or not. Because remember, ethics exists in the human mind. Ethics does not exist in the nature. Nature is neither ethical nor it is unethical. World is neither ethical nor unethical. Ethics always exist in the human mind. So that's why I told you that human beings alone are ethical animal. Nowhere else ethics exists. So this question whether atom bomb should be dropped or not, well, can be answered only by a human being by finding out some reasoning in the mind itself. That will be an ethical question. So that is how ethical questions differ from the scientific question in that sense. That is one thing that you need to remember. Now, if you look at finally in all these things that we have discussed here, then you can see here that at one point every branch of knowledge, well, scientific component of the knowledge and ethical component of the knowledge often overlap also. So this distinction that we have drawn in our class right now is a very superficial or theoretical distinction. In practical knowledge, well, ethics and science often overlap. So practical life is something like this one. Suppose for example, this is a scientific branch of a knowledge, and if this is the ethical branch of a similar knowledge, then well, there is some amount of overlap is always there. And this overlap plays a very important role in the scientific development, as we will see shortly. Suppose for example, let's take some example of both of these two branches, where science and morality somehow overlap. Suppose for example, I ask this question, that what is the impact of human action? Human action like urbanization, industrialization, agriculture, migration, etc. So if you ask this question, what is the impact of human actions on environment, then that is a scientific question, and the study of that question we call that as environmental science. On the other hand, if you ask a slightly different question, that should we act in such a manner that we take care of our environment, then that becomes an ethical question, and that is what we call environmental ethics. So we have environmental science and we have environmental ethics. Every branch of knowledge can be understood in a similar manner. We have medical science, we have medical ethics. We have engineering science and we have engineering ethics. So every branch of knowledge, maybe it has a scientific component and it has an ethical component also. And what is the role of ethical component in science? Well, role of the ethical component is that ethical component gives us a direction of the scientific movement. Remember, science does not have a direction. Science can only make a prediction about a future. Direction of the change is always determined by ethics. So direction of change is always determined by ethics only. Science is not about direction, science is only about a prediction, maybe a blind prediction, maybe a directionless prediction. Direction is always decided by the ethics. So, for example, depending on how do you answer the ethical question, scientific development will or will not happen. Suppose, for example, if you answer that question, second question, that should we act in such a manner that we take care of our environment? If we answer this question that yes, we should try to protect our environment, then that will change the direction of environmental science, that how the protection of environment can be done. So, whether it should be done or not, that is what ethical question is there. And then after, well, how it can be done will become domain of scientific investigation. So, every branch of knowledge has a scientific component and it has an ethical component also. On this topic also, there can be some question in your UPSC exam. There is a very common question that is asked in the ethics paper everywhere in the world, is also this, that is technology value neutral? Is science value neutral? Well, how can you answer that question? Well, you can answer that question in three parts. First part of your answer should be that, well, differentiate between science and morality, technology and morality, descriptive, explanatory and predictive, or prescriptive, justification, or the directive. So, differentiate between the two type of question, is out, fact, value, etc. Then after, so one part of your answer would be that. The second part of your answer would be that you have to agree with that assertion that technology is actually value neutral. So, that is an agreement, that is an, you can say, agreement of an assertion. And the third part of your answer should be that technology is value neutral. That is important, that is a fact. You can give some example of that also. That technology has no value. Value means what? Well, right or wrong. Technology is neither right, science is neither right nor it is wrong. Scientific laws are beyond right and wrong. If you jump out of the window, for example, and you get hurt, then you cannot blame that gravity is bad. It got me hurt. So, science is not bothered about it is good, it is just there. Gravity is there. The technology is already there. You don't have to bother about. So, technology is value neutral. But third part of your answer would be that utilization of technology is always a question of value. How do you use that technology? How do you utilize that technology is always a question of value. Suppose, for example, think of it. Nuclear technology. You can use the nuclear technology. That nuclear technology, if this question is asked from you, that do you think that nuclear technology is good or bad? That's an absurd question. That it is neither good nor it is bad. It is just there. It is technology. Technology is never good, neither bad. But how do you use the technology is always a question of good and bad in that sense. So, for example, nuclear technology can be used in order to make a nuclear bomb also, and it can be used in order to make a nuclear reactor also, nuclear medicine also. So, technology is not good and bad, but whether you are using it for this purpose or that purpose, that is good and bad. So, and depending on that, well, utilization will be allowed in the society or not. So, suppose, for example, if we decide that nuclear technology should not be used to make a nuclear bomb, then all the research or development of nuclear bomb will be banned in the society. And if we answer the question that nuclear reactor is good, then, well, is right, then, well, we can allow the research in the nuclear reactor, etc. So, nuclear, any technology is neither good nor it is bad, but its use, its utility is good or bad. Suppose, for example, the medical science, if you look at it, that knowledge of medical science can be used in order to make a vaccine also and save millions of people's life, and the same knowledge of medical science can be used to make a nuclear, can be used to make a biological weapon also, which can be used to kill millions of people. Technology is same, but this technology can be used to make a nuclear, you can say the vaccine also, or biological weapon also. So, whether this knowledge be used for making a vaccine or for making a biological weapon will be determined by ethics. So, if ethics tells us that biological weapon is bad, then all the research on a biological weapon would be stopped. Development to that direction is closed. And if you decide, ethics decides, answers this question that vaccine is good, then research in the vaccine will become more prioritized. That direction will be open. Remember, direction is often set by the ethics in that case. So in anything, same knowledge of engineering science can be used to make a World Trade Center also, and it can be used in order to make a concentration camp also. Now ethics will determine whether it should be used for this purpose or that purpose. This direction we should move again in scientific development or that direction. That is always determined by ethics. So that is how science and ethics differs from each other. Any such question you can find that ethics always gives a direction to the scientific development. A scientist can possibly say that I can do the cloning, human cloning. Cloning can be done, we know that technologically it is feasible, it is possible now. So a scientist can say that we can do the human cloning. But next ethical question comes up, should we do cloning or not? Is cloning right or wrong? And depending on the answer, research in cloning will be allowed or prohibited. So if the ethics tells us that cloning is bad and we should not do cloning, then all the research in cloning will be stopped. It can be criminalized also, all the resource will be dried up in that research. So the idea is that utilization of technology or development of technology is always a question of value. What purpose this technology is going to be used for, what purpose this technology is to be developed for, that is always a question of ethics. So if there is a question like this one, that is technology value neutral, you have to write that. Technology is value neutral, no doubt about that, but utilization of technology is always a question of value, it is always a question of ethics. That is how the two differ from each other, and that is how you have to answer that. So there can be many questions on this topic, science and morality, and this is how you have to approach them. Now next important topic that I would like to briefly mention here would be integrity. Now, because whenever we talk about ethics, then almost at the same time we talk about integrity as well. Ethics and integrity, they are the two terms that we often talk together. So let's briefly talk about what exactly we mean by integrity here and how important role does integrity play in our ethical life. Though integrity is a very important topic and we will be talking about integrity throughout our course till the last class. So today also I will talk about integrity, and I will talk about integrity in civil service in the end of our course also. But let us talk about what exactly integrity is in ethics. Now first important thing that you need to tell me, that what do you think is the normal meaning of the term integrity? Integrity, to integrate, integral. Now if you look at these words again, then all of you know the meaning of these terms. To integrate basically means to combine, to join. So when two different things are integrated together, unite them, join them, combine them, make them one, convert them into one complete unified whole, then that process is called integrity. In mathematics, you must have studied your calculus, where you talk about two branches of calculus, differential calculus and integral calculus. In differential, what we do, we take a variable and divide that into small tiny parts. And in integral, what we do the reverse of them, put all of them together to unify them to make one complete whole. Here also the term integrity means exactly the same thing. So the question here is that what is it that we try to integrate in ethics? Let us talk about that a little. Now if you look at us, the human being, me, you or anybody, if you look at us as the human being, then you will see that we all have inside us two different parts. There are two parts of our personality, our existence, our being. Let us call the first part of our being as real self. Let us call that as real self. What is real self? Real self essentially means that what we actually do or who we actually are. So we all are real people living in this world where anybody can look at us, see us, observe us. We do something in our life that can be seen by others. That is real self. But one of the important thing about human nature is that along with having a real self, we have another self also. Let's call that as an ideal self. Let's call that. So our self has two parts, real self and ideal self. What is the ideal self? Ideal self is what we think, we should, what we think we should do, or what we think we should be. That is what we call the ideal self. So we all have a real self, and we do something and what we think we should do. That combination of that should is what we call the ideal self. Now suppose, for example, there is a person whose real self is something like this and whose ideal self is something like this. There is a significant amount of overlap between the two. This is the real self and that is the ideal self. Then we will say that this person would be very high in integrity. Why he is high in integrity? Because his real self and his ideal self are integrated together. That what he does and what he thinks he should be doing are more or less same. What life he is leading right now and what life he thinks he should be living, both of them are more or less same. He is a person of high integrity. His personality exists as one complete unified whole. That is how he lives. So that is a high integrity. On the other hand, suppose for example there is a person whose real self is this and whose ideal self is this. There is very little amount of overlap between the two. Then we will say that this person has low integrity. Why so? Because his real self and his ideal self are disintegrated. What he does and what he thinks he should be doing are two different things. What life he is living and what life he thinks he should be living are two different things. So we will say that he is low in integrity, and such people who are low in integrity, they have a lots of, as we will see throughout our course, they have lots of internal conflict or contradiction. So that is something that, and this internal conflict and contradiction creates a lots of problem. So there is something inside them which keep on contradicting them all the time. So whenever he does something, then something is sitting in his own mind which keeps on telling this person, you are wrong, you are wrong. They are leading a bad life, you are a bad person, you are a bad life. So there is a disconnect between his real and ideal, and it is very difficult to handle in our day-to-day life. Just think of it. Suppose for example, there is a person in your life. Suppose there is a person in your life, in your family, in your neighborhood, in your school, college, somewhere, who is your big critique. Every time when you do something, that person comes to you and tells you that you are wrong, you are wrong, you are a bad person, you are a bad person. How difficult it is to live with such a person? It's very difficult. But if such a person is somebody outside, then it is easier to handle that person. You can simply throw that person out of your life, get lost, I don't want to talk to you. That's easy to handle. But what if such a person is sitting in your own head, which keeps on telling you all the time? You cannot remove that person, it's a part of your personality. But it is a big critique of yours. It always keeps on contradicting you, conflicting you that you are wrong, you are wrong, you are bad, you are bad. It becomes very, very difficult to handle it for long. Because of that, such people who are low in integrity often suffer from many problems. Problems like, for example, anxiety, depression, or even the things like, you can say, insomnia, or even the things like, in extreme case, psychosomatic problems, etc., etc. So because of that internal conflict and contradiction, sometimes they suffer from anxiety, they suffer from depression. Remember, anxiety and depression may have other causes also, but one of the important cause of anxiety and depression is often the lack of integrity in the personality. Some people may have insomnia. What is insomnia? Insomnia is lack of sleep again. So they having sleep, not able to sleep at all. Now we all have such nights in our day, in our life, when we are not able to sleep. We all have. But I often like to say that if you want to see how good your day was, then just look at it, how well you sleep in the night. If you are able to sleep in the night comfortably, it means that your day was perhaps more or less good. But if you are not able to sleep in the night, then well, your day was not that good maybe. Because these ghosts, these conflict and contradiction are the internal ghost, which keeps on telling you all the time that you are bad, you are bad. And these ghosts become more active while we are sleeping. When you are awake, then you are busy in so many things around you. But when you are trying to sleep, for example, then we become more, you can say these ghosts become more active in that case. They keep on pestering us all the time. So during the night, it often disturbs in our sleep. But we all have, as I told you, we will see that is important also, that we all have some sleepless night. That is okay. But if it becomes insomnia, what is insomnia? When a person is not able to sleep continuously for weeks and months also without taking any sleeping pill. So only by taking sleeping pill the person will be able to, otherwise he will never be able to sleep, and that becomes insomnia, complete deprivation of sleep, natural sleep. Or sometimes in extreme case, it can become psychosomatic problem also. What is a psychosomatic problem? Psychosomatic problem are those problems in which there is a biological symptom but psychological cause. So such a person may have headache, for example, and if he or she goes to a doctor, doctor will say that there is no problem with your biology, but still symptom is there, headache. Such people may have ulcer in the stomach without any biological cause. Such people may extreme case may suffer even from paralysis, for example, without any biological cause. So it may lead to such serious problem also for the person sometimes or the other. So that is the problem of low integrity. On the other hand, people who are high in integrity, they often have many advantages also in their life. What is the advantage of high integrity? Well, first advantage is that people who are high in integrity, normally they are happier in their life. They are normally happier in their life. So the direct correlation between has been found between happiness and integrity. More integrity the person has, happier the person will be in his or her life. That is one important thing. And happiness, as we all know, is one of the most important goal of our life. We all want to be happy in our life. That is one thing. Other important thing is that it is normally found that the people who are high in integrity, barring some exception maybe, they are normally more successful. So integrity has been directly found to be correlated with the success. More integrity, higher success. Less integrity, less success in the life. So success in life is often determined by, is often found to be related with the, correlated with the, significantly correlated with the amount of success. That's why we often say, we'll see that in our application part, governance part later on, that integrity is one of the good important precondition for the can say a successful bureaucrat also. If you want to be a successful bureaucrat, then integrity is one of the core competence that you need to have. So it is possible. So integrity often leads to more success, barring some exception maybe. Such people on the other hand, well, they often fail in their life. They are the people, they ultimately are caught by the CBI or ED, etc. They on the other hand, they don't have to bother about CBI or ED, etc. Success is more. Third important thing is that such people who are high in integrity, they are often more trustworthy. They are often more trustworthy in their life. Trustworthiness we will talk about, there is a whole topic for that in our later class we will discuss. But here we can simply say that integrity and trust is often found to be very closely related to each other. More integrity you have, more you will be trusted by others. Trustworthy means what? How much you are trusted by other people, how much people trust you. And trust, as you will see in our later class also in more detail, that trust is a very important component of a good life. So trust is something that's a very important part of good life. There is a beautiful quotation of Friedrich Nietzsche, one of my favorite philosophers. I may discuss his theory in my class later on. Nietzsche had said that, well, to be trusted is a higher compliment than being loved. Now that's very interesting. Suppose, for example, somebody tells you, I love you, and somebody tells you, I trust you. In which case, you should be more proud of yourself as a personality? Well, in the second case, love is something that even sometimes we love even the bad people. Think of it, a mother may may love her son even if the son is a criminal. She may not like him, but still she may love him. So somebody loves you is not a character, is not a reflection of your character. But if somebody tells you, I trust you, then you should be proud of yourself. That is a true reflection of your character. So to be trusted is a higher compliment than being loved, because trust is not something that is given to everybody. We trust very few people in our life. Love, we can do many. But well, trust is something that is very, very limited, very rare resource again. So trust is a very important part of a good life. We'll discuss a lot about the importance of trust in our life in a later class. So these people are normally more trustworthy. Because of that further, that these people often have much better relationships in their life. They have normally much better relationship in their life. So, and having good relationship in the life also is a very important part of a good life. So that is also important here, that so such people who are low in integrity here, well, they also have relationship, but their relationship are very shallow and very superficial. Theirs on the other hand is very deep and profound relationship. So their relationship is often good. Other important thing is that such people are often more healthy. Physical health also, of course, these people are more unhealthy. Anxiety, depression, insomnia are all a sign of a mental health, bad health, mental health. They also suffer from physical ailment also. So integrity has been correlated with physical health also, immunity of the person also. We'll discuss in some later class how and why. But these people are normally more healthy also. So many such evidence has been found that integrity is highly beneficial. Idea is that integrity is beneficial. Integrity has two important consequences. First of all, having integrity is in itself is a reward, that you exist as one complete, there is no division inside you. That itself is a reward. But more importantly, integrity is beneficial also. It often creates better conditions of our life. And such people on the other hand who are low in integrity, they often have all the problem. They are normally less happier, they are less successful, they are less trustworthy, they have bad relationship, and they are more unhealthy in their life. All of these are the consequences of high or low integrity. Now next important question is that how can we achieve that integrity in us? Well, in order to achieve integrity, we need to do three things. First of all, know your real self. Knowing yourself is a very important part of a good life. We'll discuss in a later class how can we know ourselves. We'll talk about that in a later class. Second important thing is that know your ideal self. That also is a very important part of a good life. You must realize what is your ideal self. That must be consistent with your real. Suppose for example, if I make an ideal self for myself, that in the next election, for example, after the next election I want to become the Prime Minister of India, then that will be a problematic thing. Because I know that I cannot win even a panchayat election maybe, but if I make an ideal that I want to become the Prime Minister of the country, then I will always be under distress. That I do not want, I am not becoming what I want to. That is a bad ideal for me. I should not try to become something that will be so impossibly difficult for me. So know your ideal self, that should be commensurate with your ability, your real life and all. And third important thing that you have to do is that change your real self in the direction of the ideal self. Life is all about the change, but change must have a direction. So which direction we should move? Well, that is what we determine. That is what we call, that is what is required in order to have integrity. Three things: know your real self, know your ideal self, and change your real self in accordance with your ideal self. That is one thing that you need to remember. Another important thing is that integrity in this sense is not a static thing, that once you achieve integrity and it's over. No. Integrity is a very dynamic concept. That every time when you do something right, then think of it, your real and ideal comes closer to each other. And every time when you do something wrong, then your real and ideal moves away from each other. So that is another very important thing. That's why integrity is dynamic, it keeps on changing. And it is very difficult for a normal, almost next to impossible for a normal human being to have ideal and real 100% overlap. That is not even desirable also. That is the reason that in my diagram here, I have not made ideal and real 100% overlapping. there is always some amount of non-overlapping part also there, where ideal and the real do not mix, do not overlap, are not same. That is one important thing. And that is also okay. 100% overlap may not be possible. So, for example, in a person, if real and ideal will become 100% same, then that person, who will that person be? That person will become more like a Buddha. That lack of integrity, somehow, some non-overlap may be okay. That works as a motivation for us to work harder to change ourselves. But in a person, if both of them become same, then that person will become more like Buddha. Who is a Buddha? Well, Buddha is a person who has achieved the highest potential of his, well, personality, his life. There is nothing more to change, that there is nothing more to, well, become better. So, if in your case 100% integrity, if you have real and ideal is same, then you should not be sitting in this classroom. You should be where? Maybe in the Himalayas, doing meditation on what Buddha used to do. So, Buddha did not need to attend a classroom to become a civil servant. He did not have any lack of integrity, 100% overlap between his real and his ideal. We do not need to have that. So, some amount of non-overlap is okay, because that works as a source of motivation for us to change. We will discuss about that in our later class when we will discuss motivation as a part of our course. But this is, so 100% overlap is neither necessary nor even desirable. So, that is what is required for both of them. Now, next important question is that in this whole thing, where does ethics fall? What is the role of ethics in that integrity? And we often say that role of ethics is that ethics is something that leads to integrity. If you follow certain ethical principles, then what you get in the result, well, will be integrity. Ethics is the means, integrity is the end. Ethics is the process, integrity is the product. So, if you follow ethics appropriately, then what you get at the end of it will be the integrity. So, this is how the two are so closely related to each other. That is why we often talk about ethics and integrity often together in a single breath. It is because of this reason that we have discussed here throughout, that integrity in this sense, if you look at it, it is a problem for the human being to solve. Integrity is a problem for a human being to solve. It is the biggest problem that we have to solve in our life in order to lead a good life. If you are able to solve the problem of integrity, then all other problem of your life will fall into its proper place. That will become much easier to handle once you handle the problem of integrity. So, integrity is a big problem that we as a human being have to face, have to solve. For other animal, integrity is not a problem. Why not? Because other animals, if you look at it, they have a real self, but they do not have an ideal self. A dog, for example, does not sit under a tree sometimes and think that I want to become like that dog. No, they do not think like that. So, they are okay with they do not think, why I am a dog, why not I am a tiger maybe. So, they do not think like that, they are okay with whatever they are. Because of that, their life is much simpler. Our life is problematic because we have a real self, but we are never happy with it. We always want to have an ideal self, which always tries to change us. Because of that, integrity is not a problem for other animal, integrity is a problem for the human beings. Biggest problem perhaps that we need to solve. So, in this, if you look at it, if real and ideal becomes 100% same, then that person has one possibility that he will become a Buddha. But that person has a second possibility also. What is that? He can become an animal. So, only animals have no problem of integrity, or Buddha has no problem. We all, in between the two extreme, we always have a problem of integrity that we have to solve. We have to go beyond, towards rather becoming Buddha rather than towards becoming an animal maybe. So, that is why integrity is so important. That is what is the role of integrity in our life. So, that is how ethics and integrity are often talked together. There was a question, I think. Sir, is not every ethical person not integrity? Yes, every ethical person will have integrity. I hope that you got your answer. So, every ethical person will have integrity. Unethical people often have a problem of integrity. So, Every time when you do something wrong, then your integrity will be reduced because of that. So that is the one thing. So this is one important topic that we have to understand. Though about integrity, remember, we will keep on talking about throughout the course. So that is this topic is over for this. Next topic we will start, but after a break. So we'll take 1 hour break, and then after we'll start with the next important topic in this sense.